This is the Catch a Break podcast, the insider's guide to breaking into and navigating the entertainment industry. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. You can find us at catchabreakpodcast.com and all the social media at catchabreakpod, as well as all the podcast places. The presenting sponsor of Season 4 of Catch a Break is Santa Clarita Studios, a full-service independent studio featuring 35 sound stages, an amazing new backlot featuring New York and LA downtown street with interiors and an alley, fully furnished production office space, and suite-style executive offices along with post-production space. Dedicated to providing an attentive and personally tailored experience for all their clients, Santa Clarita Studios offers rentals and services to meet any need and budget. Find them at santaclaritastudios.com. Hey, did you hear? There's a new streaming experience called Max. With everything from HBO Max, including HBO, the DC Universe, Adult Swim, together with TLC, Discovery, Food Network, and more, Max really has some of the best content out there. I mean, there's literally something for everyone in my household. Max, the one to watch. Subscription required. Visit max.com. This is the last episode in our Project Greenlight series where we talk to the cast and crew of Grey Matter and get the real behind the scenes of the behind the scenes. I hope you've enjoyed this series as much as I have. If you want more, you can go to our website at catchabreakpodcast.com for pictures and transcripts. We're already working on Season 5 and we have some very interesting episodes lined up for you, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. For this final episode, I sat down with Jeff Pitts, the sound designer, and Haim Mazar, the composer of Grey Matter. We talked about how the music and sound work together, how they differentiate, and it struck me how amazing it is to talk to people who are able to put words to things that are actually very difficult to talk about. Okay, have a listen. Welcome to Catch a Break. Jeff Pitts is a Primetime Emmy Award-winning sound designer. Originally from Akron, Ohio, Jeff came to LA in 2007 and began his career working on indie films like Battle for Terra, Whackness, and The World's Greatest Dad. Since then, his work has expanded to include higher-profile productions, including Blair Witch, Death Note, The Guest, and You're Next, plus numerous LEGO franchises, including Hero Factory LEGO Atlantic, LEGO Jurassic World, LEGO Guardians of the Galaxy, and the Ninjago 4D ride at Legoland, like you're Mr. Lego. Jeff will go to extremes to get good sounds. He's combed through junkyards to find the perfect sounds of machinery and scrap metal, followed Route 66 into the Mojave to collect the sounds of ghost towns, and spent weeks in Tokyo, Seattle, and New York City recording their soundscapes. He loves curating and designing interesting sounds and presenting them in a way that emphasizes the art, the content. A lot of the time people think they won't notice the sound design, but they definitely notice when it's wrong. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thank you so much. That's very nice of you.
We also have Haim Mazar. Is that right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, he's the composer behind a wide array of musical projects, including film scores, TV shows, commercials, and live stage productions. His original music credits include the comedy series Woke for Hulu, additional music for the Nicolas Cage meta-comedy The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, and the hip-hop-infused score for the Netflix series Sneakerheads. Haim also scored the biopic thriller The Iceman, starring Michael Shannon, Adam Ropitel's critically acclaimed indie horror, The Taking of Deborah Logan, and action thriller I Am Wrath, starring John Travolta and Christopher Meloni. Haim also composes and produces music for the Walt Disney theme parks, most notably the stage show version of Moana, the upcoming Princess and the Frog re-theme of Splash Mountain, and most recently he completed the nighttime spectacular Believe Sea of Dreams for Tokyo Disney Sea. In addition to his film scoring work, Haim is an associate professor at Berklee College of Music, where he enjoys teaching film scoring classes from his Los Angeles studio. Welcome.
Thank you, Julie. So great to be here. Thank you.
You're both doing theme park rides.
That's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a weird
coincidence. I didn't know that. Yeah.
All right. Our first question here is, what is your first job and how did you get it? Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, Jeff.
My first job was interning at a post audio studio in Santa Monica. And so I was basically interning and then became a tech at the studio. And then from there it springboarded into all this other stuff.
Is that always what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Sound was always my interest. I mean, I didn't always want to be like a composer or anything like that. I was like very interested in like weird sounds and like just that's where my brain gravitated towards when I was younger. So
how did you know that was a job?
I did not know that was a job. Yeah, I did not know. And so I did all of this and learned about different recording techniques and synthesis and all these things were just studio stuff. And then I thought all there was like music recording and that kind of thing. And then I kind of like had a moment where I was like, kind of like, oh my God, what am I doing? I've like spent all my life learning this and I don't know what I'm going to do with this knowledge I have now. And then I started like looking, where can I apply all this stuff? And it was like, okay, well, you can do sound for video games, or you could do sound for movies and shorts and things like that. So I just kind of started dabbling my feet in those different things.
So were you into music at all, or was it strictly like sound?
No, I was into music. Yeah, for sure. But I don't think I wanted to be, I'm not like trained musician or anything like that. So the focus for me was more on processes and just weird, unique sounds and stuff like that, and like how to capture those.
So were you nerding out on music before you were thinking about applying it to film and television? I think that's what I just heard.
Yeah. Nerding out on even just like reading about different recording techniques, or like even just simple things like learning like what is an aux, all of this stuff I kind of like self-taught. So I didn't really go to school for anything. So I just kind of like hacked my way through the entire forest, so to speak. I kind of figured everything out. So it was just kind of, everything just kind of came as it came, and I learned it. So that's how it went.
Okay, so then you started learning on the job. I'm thinking for the person who's out there listening who's like super sound, into it.
Super sound dork nerd.
I wasn't going to say those words. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you are that person, then you're a good candidate for working in audio post.
Are there tons of you out there, or not so much?
I mean, are there tons of us? I mean, I'd say that, well, yeah. I mean, if you go on, Facebook or anywhere, you're going to find a whole collection of those people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a good number of people out there that are like that. And I think a lot of them have different, I think it's pretty dynamic. Like there's some guys that spend their whole careers like recording cars, and there's some guys that do editorial for podcasts, or, I mean, it's just like very eclectic. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, so you can get super niche and do all the things.
I can get super niche and do a lot of the things. I think there's like some stuff that I've purposely not learned how to do. Like I really have no interest in editing dialogue. So I don't really put myself out as somebody that can do that work, because I don't want to do it.
Duly noted. I'll be editing this podcast myself.
Yeah, you're going to do it.
Okay, fine. All right, we are sharing this podcast with Haim. Let's bring you in. What was your first job and how did you get it?
My first job was working as a composer assistant to a composer mentor named John Frizzell, and I got that job right after I graduated from Berklee College of Music, and I moved out to LA, from Boston to LA. This was at the end of 2008, and through a recommendation from the dean of the film scoring department at the time, who I made very aware that I'm looking for an assistant position, kind of to get started and have some sort of an in to the business. And with a lot of luck and timing, I got a call from him right when I moved out to LA, and he offered me to come in for an interview, and I did. And I got the job, and I started that same day. That was my real school of like how to work in the business and how to write a film score. And I worked with John for about 2 years, and we did a whole array of projects, movies and TV shows, and I got to see everything. Kind of like driving like a Formula One car, but you're next to the driver and you get to see everything. So that was great. And then John, after that, after about a year or so, he was kind enough to basically recommend me for the smaller indie film. At the time we were doing, I think these two like Sony Screen Gems movie. One was Legion, another one was The Roommate. And John was just really busy, and he got a call by, I think it was the assistant picture editor that was cutting this kind of smaller direct-to-DVD. Back then there were direct-to-DVDs.
Now a DVD is...
Exactly. You can look it up. And it was like a little too small for John, and also he was like so slim. So basically what he did is like he vouched for me. He said like, he talked to the producers and he said like, I can't do it, but like I have this great guy that works with me, and he's going to do the whole score for my studio, and I'm going to oversee it, and it's going to be great. then he hung up the phone and he said, like, if you screw it up, you're never going to work in this town again, buddy. So you better get this right.
No pressure, no pressure.
Which is what it was kind of a passing of the baton, I guess, because John worked for a composer named James Newton Howard, who was like a really famous big A-list composer. And that's kind of how John's career started, is that there was this big movie and James couldn't do it. He was busy like doing like The Fugitive or some big movie like that. And he basically told the producers, I'm going to write the theme, but John here is going to do the whole score. And if he F's it up, I'm going to do it for free, which, it's like crazy to say that to guys like that for someone. But so John kind of did the same thing for me. And I'm very grateful for that to this day. So that was my first job,
Wow.
The work with John, and then later on getting my own first solo composer credit, through that relationship.
So that referral worked out.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, this brought up 1,000 questions for me. First of all, it sounds like you studied composing for film in school.
I did.
Did you always know that's what you wanted to do?
No, I grew up playing music from a very young age. So I played piano from like age 5 or 6, and I was classically trained, and then kind of made a switch to jazz. And I grew up mostly playing. I grew up in Israel, and I went to music school my whole life. Then eventually in Israel, you got to do military service. So I was accepted to be in the military bands as a musical director. That was like a really great experience. Kind of like, being on stage all the time, doing a lot of arrangements and working with professional musicians that were like military reserves. And after that, I got a scholarship to go to Berkeley, basically as a jazz piano player. And my whole passion was about being on stage and playing jazz.
You're going to be a performer.
As a performer, yeah. And although I've done some arranging and a little bit of conducting and producing here and there, but I was really kind of like a keyboard piano player. And then I got to Berkeley and I got to see like some of the world's like finest like top 1% talent.
Mm-hmm.
And also at the end of the day, it's funny because like jazz is kind of like it's an American music. So, and as an Israeli, I bring to the jazz a lot of fusion and a lot of things that are maybe more unique. But in the core of it, swing and playing jazz, it just, at least for me, when I saw people who, like, for example, if you grew up going to church and playing church music, your swing and your feel is going to be a whole lot different than someone like me who grew up in Israel. So for various reasons, and also just seeing like unbelievable musicians and also the music business changing, I kind of gave up trying to be a performer, and almost like at the same time when I was working at the library, this book about film scoring fell to my lap, and I read about, John Williams and Steven Spielberg work together and how you can utilize a whole symphony orchestra in the score. And there was kind of like a eureka moment. And I went and got, my major declared as film scoring kind of like the next day. And that was the beginning of the journey. So that was the first time I like realized what this whole thing, film scoring thing, gig is.
Like it all kind of came together.
Yeah. And it was like from that moment on, I was like, that's what I want to do. Anything related to that.
So when you're assisting someone on a film, what parts are you doing? Are you arranging? Are you recording stuff? Are you getting to compose pieces of it? Are you taking the theme and doing variations? Like what do you do?
A little bit of all those things that you just mentioned. It really depends on the position, and there's no one alike. It depends on who you work for and what their needs are. But yes, I mean, usually you kind of start doing kind of helping around the studio and answering phone calls and
Day one, get coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Day 2, add violin to the score.
Kind of. I mean, it can happen really quickly. It also depends on your skills and how many other assistants work in that facility. So I think like with any assistant position, there's a relationship there. And first of all, you have to be, I think in anything, I'm sure same in your field, Jeff, you got to be a nice person. You got to be somebody that people enjoy hanging out with. And that's kind of like the start of it. And if that's right, and then the other thing is to gain the other person's trust, the partner's trust. And if you do that, then they are going to give you more and more responsibilities. And also the way I looked at it working for John, it was like, I want to help your business, so to speak, succeed, because I think that your success will be my success, because if you're going to be successful, I'm probably going to get a little bit more opportunities.
Help me help you help me.
Exactly. So, it's this kind of a whole inclusive approach, and really diving into the gig. And I wasn't doing any other jobs when I was working with him either. So yeah, that helps. Looking at it as a long-term opportunity, as opposed to like, oh, I just want to like work, with this guy for a month and get the credit and leave.
Yeah.
Because there's you have to learn how people work, and how and how they like everything done, and that there's a long learning curve basically. So when you take on an assistant position, if you come to it okay, and kind of letting the person know that, hey, I'm okay working for you for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, even.
Like it's an apprenticeship.
Exactly. Yeah. And that becomes your school, and how you learn how to do things from that, what to do, what not to do also. So yeah, it's a very interesting experience to go through.
Yeah.
And when you're first starting out, you really need to like throw yourself into the opportunities that are given.
Yeah.
And you might say to yourself, oh, this isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, over here doing this thing. But there's time for that.
This is how you get to that thing.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that you even got an opportunity that's like you're already 1 out of 10.
That's the first miracle.
Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
So,
totally, it's the first miracle.
Yeah. So don't squander that, because the next one might not happen.
Okay, let's talk about gray matter now. So knowing Miko was coming out of shorts and kind of out of where she had done everything herself, right, or had a very clear vision. We're pouring the wine. We are settling in here.
Let's go somewhere.
Sure. Okay.
And knowing she didn't always like have a team, to do the sound and the composing and all the pieces. I'm curious how, I'm assuming, I'm making this up now as I'm talking, but that you read the script and you start to hear what you think is important, or you start designing your head around it.
Yeah.
A, is that true? What does that sound like? And then how do you kind of present that to the director? I'm going to ask you the same question in a minute, Haim, so you get a minute to think about it.
Yeah. Reading scripts is like a pretty important part of the gig that I didn't really realize was going to be a big important part of the gig. So there's really 2 things that I want to come up with when I read a script. One is, are there any unique props in the script that I need to record? Either sequestering that specific prop from the set, or maybe finding it and recording it myself.
For example?
So on Death Note, there was a lot of like thematically in the movie, there's this book, right? And that book it was integral to the film. You'd write in it and people die and stuff like that. So in my mind, an integral part of the design was to use paper. So either tearing it or ripping it, or doing things like that with paper. And then to springboard off that, I was like, oh, well, not just any paper. Let's go get handmade Japanese paper.
As
you would.
Yeah.
So then I went to, which is cool to be in LA, because there's like a place, I think it's in Santa Monica. It's like right next to like all the train tracks and stuff down there. And they had like a bunch of handmade Japanese paper.
Wow.
So I went down there and got all that. And then I was able to record all that stuff, and I'm like flapping it and tearing it, and something like cloth, really, because it's like so like thick, and
So you're reading it thinking, what does that book sound like?
Right. So you go, okay, that book is going to be a critical item. And I think I did get that. Did I get the book in that? I might have gotten that specific book to record.
Like opening, shutting.
Yeah.
Things you wouldn't even think about watching a movie.
No, and nor should you. You're watching a movie. So
if you're doing it right, you're not thinking about it.
Yeah, you don't need to think about that. It should just be done. So that's one aspect of it, is like these, and I guess I kind of tied the 2 together there, and then the other aspect is to say like to roll it back to Gray Matter real quick. When I read the script for Gray Matter, there was really nothing in there that I was like, oh, that prop needs to be recorded, because there's nothing about what that is. But the secondary ideas are like just concepts that you might think of by reading the script. So for instance, with like Gray Matter, there's like a part in the script in the pool, spoilers, when, everything's falling apart. And I remember like a line in the script that was like something about, oh, this thing is coming up through, or whatever. So my ideas were kind of like springboarding off the idea that like they're all using these psychic powers, but like there might be something else there that's kind of like not everybody even knows what that is. It's just kind of like a larger power than what any of them are using. They're just like playing around with this thing that's like serious. And I like stuff like that. So that actually helped springboard some of my design work, because I was doing the design work thinking like, okay, there's this like this entity being thing that's like, yeah, keep using it. Like we're getting closer, like the idea that like everybody in the movie is like messing around with the thing. They just come in and just like swallow the planet, like that's where my brain tends to go with that kind of stuff.
So are you foreshadowing that with like little bits of that sound?
Yeah. So there's like design stuff I did in the film that's kind of like whispery and kind of like, whatever. And that's all based on my ideas of having this like this being that they're all oblivious to, that's like trying to push through and like find their way through by them using their psychic energy. This thing is now getting closer to where it wants to be, which is on this side. So gray matter too? I don't know. But
so then you go to Miko and say, hey, I have this idea.
Yeah. Well, no, not so much like that idea. I mean, I definitely did bring that up to her, and she called me a nerd. But
and then said, I'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah, but it worked,
Yeah.
It was in the movie. So yeah, I mean, it's on a project like this, you read the script and then really you're going to start working. You do bring those ideas in a meeting. Like, you'd have a spotting session or something like that. And you say, hey, I would think this would be a cool idea or whatever. Like, for instance, with all the magic moving hands and things like that, like the sound, I knew that the sound for that stuff had to feel solid. You know what I'm saying? It couldn't feel ethereal. It had to feel like a ball almost, like a thing, because it's like knocking people around the room and stuff. And it's like, you don't want it to be, So
it has some weight.
Yeah, you want the sound to feel like, oh my God, what is that? And so that was another idea that I got from reading the script. I was like, can't just be a bunch of people waving their hands and Harry Potter stuff flying, can't do that,
Is there some time travel in it too?
Well, so there's like teleportation.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of.
So there's teleportation.
Thank you for teleportation. I haven't seen the movie, just so you know.
That's fine.
Was there a specific sound for that?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's like a kind of a tremolo kind of thing, but again, forceful, because I wanted it to feel like this is physical stuff. But underneath all of these, like, there's like a couple physical things. So there's like people throwing people across the room or whatever like that. And then there's the teleportation. And for both those sounds, I wanted it to feel solid. And then there's the other sounds too, which is just like, the surrealness that's pushing in on them. And for that stuff, I wanted it to feel like, Cthulhu is about to push through or whatever.
How are you making these sounds?
How am I making them? Well,
or is that the secret magic?
It's not secret.
I mean, are you doing it on a keyboard? Are you doing Foley? Are you throwing stuff against the wall?
Yes. Yeah, like all of those things are true. So you're either recording sounds, you are manipulating sounds that you've previously recorded or that are pulled from libraries even. And so, for stuff like, I like to design stuff to picture. So I will set up processes and then manipulate those processes against the picture. Some people like to just like, they get a cool process going and then they just go hog wild with it and they just make a bunch of it.
Process.
So like a process with anything. So if you're designing a sound, let's say that you are designing, like when I did Blair Witch, I used the Kima to make the voice of the witch who was transforming into a tree. So I took the Kima, which is a sound design DSP box, and I resynthesized a female scream and wood creaking, and then I started to morph those things together. So they were like, it's, doing this weird stuff. But I put all that stuff on an XY controller so I could do it against picture. So I'm like manipulating how this stuff is like changing, but I'm watching real frames, right, while I do it. So that tends to be like how I enjoy working. So like with this movie, if somebody's like blasting somebody with their telekinesis powers, I am designing that sound in that moment right there. And so like that's a mixture of different processes. So there's only so many processes you can do. You can either add reverb to things, you can reverse that reverb, you can do delays, you can do compression, equalization, pitch shifting. These are basically delays. This is like basically everything is this kind of stuff. So if you have all that kind of stuff happening, what are your input sounds? how do those things interact with all those other things? What is the chain of events? Are you compressing all the sound after you do it? It's like with the teleport sound, it has a really good like tremolo effect, which is like like that kind of thing. But then I smashed it with compression so that it was like still dipping. You preserve that, but you're getting like some grit and some compression at the top levels of the sound.
This is so interesting. Oh my gosh. So when you start a project and you start with a script, how do you approach it?
So I think there's a difference between reacting to the script and reacting to what's actually filmed and what the end result was. So that's like a lot of times I'll read the script. It's kind of nice to do both, to be honest. But a lot of times what's on the script is not what they actually filmed, and what they filmed is not necessarily what is going to be put together in the edit. So I do whatever I can get my hands on. So they did send me the script for Gray Matter, which I read, and the first thing you do, obviously, when I read it, I do think about music, and sometimes music will be referenced in the script itself. Sometimes it won't. But either way, I try to get a sense of, what's the style and what's the mood. And, I think here it was pretty clear it was kind of like a moody, sci-fi, kind of dark ambient score. And then I start thinking about how can I interpret some of the ideas in the movie into musical terms that would make sense. And I will talk about that with the director. Sometimes I'll think about it before I bring up ideas, but I do try to find some sort of a connection. So there's a concept behind what the music is, and it's not just just like sometimes you watch a movie and it'll literally just have you see the Netflix description, it'll say ominous music.
Yeah.
You see the subtitles. So you can do that, and it'll work, and it'll get the job done. But I think it's nicer to look for a little bit more depth and have to find a connection between like what you hear and what is happening in the show. Right now I'm watching, this is unrelated, but I'm watching a show that I'm sure you guys all know. It's called The White Lotus on HBO. Yeah. And The White Lotus score is so fantastic because they incorporate human animals and jungle sounds, literally like monkey sounds into the music, and they make it feel like this jungle adventure, almost like the music that they use in Survivor, the reality show. And what that does, it makes the show feel like these characters are almost like, like baboons and monkeys, and it almost makes fun of the characters. And the reason they do that is because of the ideas behind of what's in the show, where, like a lot of the guys will act like a monkey when it comes to sex, or, like these rich people might be, they might have a lot of money and they're in these fancy places, but this is all very primal. So I try to do the same thing on basically everything that I worked on. So on Gray Matter, this is a movie about like regular people that somehow got supernatural powers, and how can I put that into music? So I started thinking with my buddy Chris Lane, who does a lot of sound design, sound design, similar to what Jeff does, but in a more musical manner, I would say. How do we make that into musical terms? And we thought of this idea of like, okay, what can we like play instruments that will make them sound like superhumans play them, or like what's a superhuman use of like a cello? And we came up with two techniques. One is this thing called jete, where you play the bow, and instead of like stroking the bow from left to right, you on a violin or on a cello, you take it and you bounce it, and then the bouncing effect makes it hit like 3 or 2 times like, instead of vroom. And that bouncing effect, if you capture that and you slow it down, it almost has these qualities of like, it's half human, half suspended, and it has this like feel of like almost like it's using gravity to create sound. It's hard to explain it, but that sound is all over the movie. And another thing we did is we took this thing called e-bow. It's an electric bow, and it's like a magnet that you can put on a banjo or any stringed instrument, and it causes the string to vibrate using magnets. So it's kind of like this, we were looking at what will make things move in a way where like it's not human touch moving them. Because in the movie, spoiler alert, the characters might reach their hands forward and do this, this gesture of like they're shooting power out of their hands, and then something will move. So what can I do with the music to reinforce that feeling and to, further take the viewer into like basically movie magic, all done in a very subconscious way. This is not something that meant to be like, oh, that weird. And also I got to be careful not to compete with what the sound design is. So that's something that early on from the script, I was already kind of starting to think like, what can I do to represent those ideas in music?
So let's talk about how you mesh these two things together, because you're saying you don't want to step on the sound design, and you're designing sound before you've heard the score, right? So how do you...
I was nice enough to send him an email before. And I was like, hey, dude, here's...
Like, what if you have totally different concepts for what that magic thing sounds like?
That can happen. That can happen.
It can very much happen.
Yeah,
but I think that we, like... The thing is like, when I started working, is like way before when you guys started working, like, the composers always start, like...
late.
Like, it's like crazy how late you guys are going. So
yeah, we got like I had 4 weeks to do the whole score.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna double click on that because that's crazy.
And I think I had 8 weeks. So I mean, which is still pretty fast, but I had 4 more weeks. But I think at some point I sent you a 2-track, and then you sent me the music.
Yeah.
When I work, and this is good for everybody, the temp music is a pretty good indication of what they kind of want. Like you'll know from the temp music if there's a silent moment.
And
right?
is the editor putting in the temp music?
The editor's going to put in the temp music with the director. They do it together. But, even if like thematically the music is changing, when there's no music, there's probably not going to be music again. So in those moments, you really want to focus on, your background sound effects and like things that are going to become more important in those moments. And then when you start working in like big action scenes and stuff like that, I think that there's like certain rules that kind of people tend to follow with like using drums in a certain spot, or maybe not using drums if there's a bunch of guns, and like, these kinds of things. All rules are meant to be broken, but these things kind of exist. So I'm always working against the music if I can get it. If I can't get it, I'm always working against the temp music. It gives me an idea, a map of where things are going to be.
And I think also sound design focuses more on non-musical and this is a big word, non-pitched sound. So the sounds that he'll put in are not necessarily going to sound like a musical element, or the sound that I'll put in, I might put in like what we call this, a drone. It's basically a low bed of ambient rumble, like, and that will have a certain pitch to it. And that's the sort of element where if he's going to put a drone, it'll be more like an airy drone that doesn't have a specific pitch to it. So that's not going to mess with whatever I'm doing. And that's a big rule that at least I try to follow, or that I expect the sound design team to follow, to not put too many musical elements and drone-like ambient in their sound design. But there are situations where...
Because sometimes you're going to have pitch in your...
He will, yeah. We had a big sequence where there was an alarm going off towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
And it's in a certain pitch, and I have a lot of action music kind of covering that whole sequence. So there was a big one where it was like, I would love to get that from you and hear what the sound of the alarm is. And I did eventually, and I think I did some tweaks, or sometimes you put against each other. It's like, wow, I did not expect that to work. Yeah, it's in this crazy key, but it's like it worked. His alarm might be in F sharp, and I'm in C.
Yeah, so you could choose either to adjust your alarm so that it is in the same key, or to have it not be.
Or I can adjust my music to whatever he's doing. So, or it might be on the stage.
It might be weird. It might sound weird because it's out.
Yeah.
And that might be cool.
Exactly.
So,
on purpose.
it doesn't...
It's kind of nice, and you leave this room of like, there's always an element. I try to show up to the dub at least once to just kind of like, hey, what did all this ended up sounding like? And
that's good.
There's a lot of surprise there, like, whoa, they added all this rumble, or like they added this, whatever the case may be. It's nice when like, because when people who have experience doing this, then he takes all of those things into consideration. He already plans for some of that unexpected stuff. So you want to leave a little bit of this, like, almost like element of surprise in it. It's really exciting. And you hear, and just like Jeff said, it's fun when it's it wasn't meant to be, but it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird how that's like not in the same key, and it's like, well,
Right.
that's a
But it works.
it
But
works.
I think
exactly.
in that specific case, we were kind of like in key.
In
and
that
it
case, we
was,
were, yeah,
yeah,
because there was no time, and we didn't want to be in a situation where we get to the stage and Miko and Byron are watching it, or whoever is watching. It's like, oh, this doesn't sound good, guys.
right. Yeah.
So yeah,
But I think, this all brings up an important point, which is that you can never become too attached to your work because ultimately you're trying to make it so that the picture is
100%.
elevated.
Yeah.
And so you cannot get too protective of things. And I always say, I should just call it killing babies. Because it could be something that's really endearing to you and that you worked a lot of time on. But if it's not working in the picture, then it's got to go.
Yeah.
And you have to accept that. You have to be able to, yeah, it can be painful, but that's okay because this is just part of the process.
It's going to be better.
The whole thing's going to be better in the end. And
it's a collaborative
absolutely
team effort.
Yeah. Everybody's working together for the same goal. And so if you've presented your work as you intended it to be, and parts of that need to go away, it doesn't mean that all your work is gone. It just means that in that moment, that's gone. And that's going to take, maybe it's maturity, but if you can have that early on where you're not defensive about your work, or if somebody's giving you notes about your work and do not get defensive because they're not giving you a note. There has to be a free flow of that.
Person.
Yeah.
It's never personal. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
Leave your ego, and it's never personal. It's really about, if somebody doesn't like what you did, it's not because he doesn't like you and your sensibility and how you put it together. He just doesn't like how that sound or that piece of music works with what he's trying to make in a movie. And he might not know how to explain, or she might not know how to explain herself, but it's not personal to you, but it can feel personal if you stayed up all night and you poured your heart and soul into it and you really believe that it's right. You might take it as a personal criticism, but it's really, really not. And I guess that's maturity too, kind of remembering that and be secure enough about yourself and your skills that if somebody doesn't like it, it's fine, that's all it is.
But yeah, you put, 10 different artists on a project.
Right. And then you could have a row of producers that are all gonna come in at the last minute and they're gonna be like, no, I like that. And everybody's worked on that in the room. Everybody's been working on it for 3 hours and they're coming with a note that kind of unravels what everybody's already been like, okay, yeah, well, we like this. And so you have to be able to absorb those notes. You might not change everything about that moment because one producer said something, but you have to be able to be like, okay, what did that person say? What do they mean by what they're saying? And then how do we address that note?
Without spinning out.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of times it'll actually make the end result better, but you totally have to run it through this filter and interpret, what does this note mean? Who gave the note? Why did he give the note? Whether you agree with it or not, you have to.
You might have an emotional response.
Oh, you will have an emotional response. You'll be like, "Oh, this idiot, he doesn't know what he's talking about," or here we go again.
Yeah.
And at some point, you do learn who gives what kind of notes and to take them literally or not, and where they are also in the hierarchy of the film. And it's a combination of a lot of things. It's but you definitely have to analyze the note, and it would be helpful for you to analyze the note and to understand what people are saying, because most people are in that situation. If they're producing a film or directing a film or cutting a film, they probably are pretty good at what they do, or at least they've proved themselves and they have some experience, and they probably beat somebody else to get to that position. So if they're giving you a note, even if they're non-sound or non-musician, they probably know something. So it's a little arrogant, I think, to dismiss it into,
You should be open to it.
You should be open to it. And like I said, it could very well be that it'll result in a better product, or a better moment in the film, if you take that into consideration.
A lot of this is about listening to people and understanding what they want. If you have a meeting with a director and the director is telling you that these things are important to them, then you should try to achieve those things and try to achieve them, break through what they even are saying. Maybe you have ideas that are like, oh, you like that? What if we did this too? And they, oh yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's you're taking their ideas and you're expanding on those. You're making them bigger than what they initially said. So
You're yes-anding it.
yeah, but you would never be able to do that if you were just like, I'm going to do what I want to do on this. I'm not listening to any guide tracks. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to cut.
Can you imagine?
Oh yeah, definitely. I can definitely imagine that.
Like I lived it. Okay, let's talk about the schedule for a minute, because you had 8 weeks, you had 4 weeks. The pressure to create, right, under those circumstances. And also, I've heard it was a very tight budget. Like, I don't know, were you hiring an orchestra? Like, let's talk a bit about what kind of constraints, what kind of choices, and how you had to do that quickly.
So starting with the schedule, which affects the budget, usually film composer will get like 4 to 8 or 12 weeks to do a full score. For me personally, the short period of time makes me kind of freak out, but that also sparks a lot of creativity, and I do well under pressure. So I use it to my advantage, and it just kind of gives the whole thing an energy.
Like you trust it's going to come.
Yeah, I have to. And then I just kind of go for a month and I'm fully invested in it. And it's like anything in that month or whatever amount of time I have, like anything goes. And I also have a very supportive family that, understands that and then lets me.
We're not going to talk to you for a month.
Yeah. So I just embrace it instead of being scared about it. I just embrace it. And then the budget is affected because, like you said, a lot of times we'll hire an orchestra, but that was kind of one of the first things that, we knew that there's not a lot of budget in this. So I had to basically come up with a way of how to give the movie what it needed, like the kind of music that it needed, and use the budget and schedule constraints to not be an obstacle, but to be helpful. So I decided to not put any orchestra into film because that will help me with going faster and also spend less money, and take a little bit of the money that I have and invest it in hiring sound designer, actually a score sound designer, my buddy who mentioned before, Chris Lane, and another friend to help me just get through the finish line, another co-composer named Daniel Stockdale. And that was kind of like my little army of, music team going into this film. And that's how I tackled it. And I try to come up with a way that I can create basically an electronic score that would have very few acoustic sounds, but those acoustic sounds are only to create that, what I was talking about earlier before, about the superhuman feeling. So because it's superhuman and it's not just natural, it made sense that it wouldn't be like just an acoustic score. Acoustic score happens to be more expensive than an electronic score, which worked in my favor. So that's kind of what how I spun it. It was like, okay, I'll take that problem and use it in my favor. And it worked. So that's how I dealt with that.
What do you do first? Like, do you always have like a theme that then goes through? Like, I'm thinking of Schindler's List, that really famous theme. It's an easy example. Do you come up with kind of something like that, or do you not always?
It's a great question. I do try to find either a theme or it's part of what the movie needs. So some movies, they ask for a theme. They're asking for a very melodic score that has melody in it and a melody that you can hum back and whistle. And some movies, they're not asking for any melodies. They're more gloomy and dark, and they're a little bit more minimalistic, and they don't guide you in the same way. And just the overall aesthetics of them are not calling for big melodic ideas. But what they might have is thematic sounds or sonic themes. And those might be like kind of certain gestures that the music might do, or certain chords, or like I mentioned before, some of those like sound design, like playing the cello in a certain way and processing it. So yes, I look for themes, and I look for basically colors. That's where I start. So I look and I read the script and I watch the movie, and I then go and I get a bunch of colors in the form of music tracks. Those could be existing tracks that I had, or I might sit by my computer and synthesize a quick example using certain sounds or a harmony or whatever it may be. And then one track might feel like the color green, and one track might feel like, like Dijon mustard. And I'll bring those colors back to Miko and the filmmakers, in the form of an email to listen to a bunch of music that is not to picture. So it would just be, here's a bunch of tracks, like a lot of tracks. Like I'll send like 50 tracks, and it's all from whatever, whatever I found, stuff that I had. I felt like writing something quickly, or I might even include a couple of tracks that are not mine in that process, just to kind of like get in whatever I need to. I usually don't. I usually try to stick to my own stuff. And then I present that to them in a very kind of loose way. It's like, what do you think about these? And they'll usually get back to you with, I like that purple and I like that turquoise. And then I try to think, where do you see purple and turquoise in your film, And those are all things that kind of give you clues to what their sensibility, and also if you were right, and hopefully you're right throughout this whole process. So you keep narrowing it down until you eventually can get to a point where you write an example, and then you think, what do you think of this music against this scene now? And hopefully they like it at that point. And if they do, that it's good to start with things that could be a theme. So in Gray Matter, there's a relationship between, there's a mother-daughter relationship. So one of the first scenes that I tackled was that one of the big sequences when they're going through this big emotional moment, and it's like a 3 or 4 minute scene. So I composed that whole sequence and I showed that to Miko, and after she liked it, I already knew, okay, I can repurpose that theme in other spots.
So then that can become a framework for...
Exactly. And you also explain that to the filmmakers, while they watch it, or you might show it as a surprise. Like, well, since you like it here, I took that same music and I put this other scene where, and it doesn't always work, but that's kind of like call it score design. Like you're trying to put those big elements in place. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you're just going to end up with this kind of like pastiche, just like just fillers, just ominous music or whatever type of music it is, but it's not related to each other. So it's not the music. You want the music to tell a story.
Yeah.
You want it to have, to evolve and kind of take you through what's happening in the film and have a conclusion at the end and a feeling of like building and an arc to it, just like the characters do. You don't want to just... Right. I mean, you could, but, yeah. And because we serve as background music, it's tempting sometimes to just take the easy way out and just put, well, whoever. It's just going to be background score at the end of the day. And some guy watching the movie on his iPad in Montana is not going to tell.
No offense, Montana.
Yeah, no offense, Montana. Wherever, like this is San Francisco, but. I don't think about it like that. I think about it as like, what's the best contribution I can give this film, and what's like another layer that I can create, to elevate this film and give or show and give it a little bit more depth and weight.
It's also interesting to hear you put words to something that's impossible to describe.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about music.
You did a very good job with that.
Thank you.
The colors are good.
Yeah.
That's a good...
Yeah.
How
about you, Jeff? I think the original question was about schedule and timing and budget and how do you approach it? What do you do first?
For my work, well, first thing I do is I send everything to the dialogue editor and the Foley team and let them get the work. And then we get like the whole nuts and the bolts of everything is you have all the dialogue that you get off the set. You have to break all that out and take a look at it and make sure that you're in good shape. And then what isn't good needs to have some ADR done to it, either to add syllables into or maybe even just taking another take of that same line and just putting that word in there. There's a million ways to handle that, but somebody's got to go through and do all that stuff, and that's our dialogue team that does that. And then also you have to send it off to Foley, and Foley does all of the, like, every time they touch each other's hands or every footstep that they do, they're doing like a cloth track. So it's like they'll do that. Like the whole movie is like,
I have to remember not to cut that out, because normally
don't cut that out.
Someone's shirt rustle.
Yeah, no, that's in there. We need that for
on purpose.
We need that for the M&E. So you have all that stuff done. You got cop belts. You have, it's just everything. The detail is all putting the glass down on a glass table. It's like, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So you get all that out to those guys. And then, when it comes time to actually like cutting the movie, I know that I have these like big scenes to do, but what I'll do is I usually just go linear. So I'll just start at the top of the film and I'll just start to work my way through the film. Now this was a little bit weird because this film, spoilers, has things that happen at the beginning of the film that also come back in the middle and at the end and all this stuff. So like when I cut the beginning of the movie, I was just kind of like, you know what? I'm not like there's some big moments that include this stuff. So I'm just gonna like put in a little bit of stuff here and then not really play it so hard. But some of the stuff I wanted to do was I wanted to create tells in these scenes that we flash back to. So, you know, like the cops, they call additional cop backup. So I have sirens starting in the distance and kind of coming in. And I thought that was a good thing where like that kind of thing repeated each time the flashback happened.
So this is an element that is not in the dialogue, but you're adding a little bit of like get some backup.
Yeah, no, they call for backup in the movie.
But you see their lips moving?
Yeah, I think, yeah, he calls for backup.
But you hear
right
the sirens like a mile away.
But then I start the siren, so he calls backup and then, you know, wait a beat and then start sirens off in the distance and have the sirens coming in. And then it's like, okay, so now we've played these sirens coming in like this. And then like, here's another part of the movie and it's the same sequence. And then the sirens are coming in again. And the sirens are cool too, because they kind of like built to the end of the scene. And it's a kind of a good thing because you can kind of have that happening. And then there's a helicopter starting to come around. And it's like,
now, is that
how are they
going
to get out of here? No.
Okay.
You just add it. You just do it. Yeah, there's not a ton.
So you add a helicopter off camera, which causes the whole situation to feel a lot more dangerous.
Right, because there's like more pressure for them to get out of that situation that they're in.
Ramped it up.
Without even realizing, you're like, oh, you know, this is some GTA 5-star level.
Yeah. 5-star criminal. Yeah. Get him. So, you know, in those situations, like, so I built that part first because it worked to build that to the end of that scene because that was a big thing for the scene. But things like the gunshots in the scene didn't really matter in that moment because they weren't presented in that first moment. But as the flashbacks come back, now the gunshots matter a lot. And then you've already built what that siren is supposed to be. So it's almost like you don't want to actually change that siren. You want that siren to be the same because of the way the movie works. If you did that like in a regular movie where you're like, oh, okay, the cops are coming. I'm going to grab all these sirens I did and slap it here. Oh, look, the cops are coming again. I'm going to grab all my sirens. And like you get yelled at because you put the exact same sounds in, and then it sounds like you're just triggering sound effects. Anytime you sound like you're just taking a sound effect and placing it, that's not going to be, it's not going to be right. Even if you are just placing sound effects, you have to make those things feel like they are in the world. You know, this cannot be like a random thing that happens right there. So, you know, I will start to just work linearly through the film. And then I'll get to the first moment I think was like she's teaching her daughter about using telekinesis to hold the box up. So that has a sound to it. And then she uses the telekinesis on the daughter to knock her down because she was back talking her or something like that. So there's a little bit of like, you know, parental abuse going on in this film. So trigger warning on that. But you know, like, so in that moment, okay, now I have to start thinking about a process that I'm going to be able to develop. So I don't have a sound effect. So I'm not making a sound that's like, oh, let me go find a sound effect in the library and I'll put it here for the telekinesis sound. Because then what happens is you have that sound and now you have to copy that and go put, oh, she's using her effect again. Let me go copy that exact sound over here and copy it again over here. And it's going to not sound good. What you want to do is you want to create something that feels organic so that you have control over what it's doing in the movie.
Is this where you would create a process?
Right.
To do
that's
it?
where I would, that's part of my workflow.
Later, but a little different?
That's right. So I would automate parameters of that process so that they're happening. And it's going to happen this way this time, and then the next time it's going to happen a different way and things like that. So that you're creating an organic process that is going to feel natural. Right,
but it's recognizable as that's the telekinesis.
Yeah, exactly. There's not going to be a question that it's not the telekinesis thing. But each time it happens, it feels different slightly. It's always going to be different, you know? So that's the thing you have to work on. That's the thing you have to do. Like if you're cutting like a car chase, you know, you're going to have all these engines and tire squeals and all this kind of stuff. But like if you always, like, let's say that there's like every time you go to the hero's car and you have him, it's like cut inside the car. And you're inside the car for 20 frames. And then every time you go back to him, if you have the exact same accelerator sound, I mean, you fail. You're like, no. Like things have to Things have to feel like they're real. Yeah. You know?
Oh, you know what? Were either of you on mic and on camera for the reality show?
I was for a little bit in the beginning.
How was that? How was it working like that?
That was fun.
Oh, you liked it?
Yeah, I did. I hope it makes it to the show. So I did my interview with Nico and the producers on Zoom, a recorded Zoom. Wasn't my first interview on Zoom, but the fact that it was recorded was kind of, to think that it can be aired on television kind of makes it a little different. And then I went to visit the cutting room at some point and presented some music. Actually, that was the first time I played them any music. I think was in the cutting room. And that was filmed. So they mic'd me up, and I went into, I met Miko and Byron and gave a fake TV. No, I gave her a real hug, and then they're like, well, we didn't mic you up. Can you do it again? And then I gave her a fake hug. And then the rest of it was actually filmed in real time. And it was fine. There were like there was a cameraman in the room.
Yeah. Did you feel like you had to watch what you said, or were you just
after 2-3 minutes? No, I mean, at least for me, taking a meeting can be an exhausting thing, because you kind of you naturally watch what you're saying and you're very focused. So, but no, it didn't make it. You forget about the cameras very quickly. Is what I felt like.
Okay, so it's fine. Jeff, you on camera at all?
Yeah, I did spot. Well, I think I had some Zoom meetings that I just now remembered were recorded. So I have no idea what happened in those. So I had those that happened. And then I went in for spotting with Miko and Byron, and that was all recorded. But I think the film crew was a little freaked out because those things, a spotting of a whole movie takes 8.5 hours. So it's they're there at the beginning, 2 of them, plus the spot camera sitting there. And that's as the day went on, it was less and less.
What is very tedious, and it just
not dramatic.
It's not dramatic.
Not fighting about it.
It's just some man or a woman sitting in a dark room in front of a monitor and moving the mouse around. It's frames go by.
I was oh, can you hit pause and go back and play that again? Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, I think we should maybe look at re-recording that line.
Yeah.
Okay, so we won't look for you to be highlighted on some episodes.
We'll see. Maybe.
I hope we'll make
They did an exit interview with me, which is a bit weird because it's after 8.5 hours of I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And they're do this exit interview. I'm
really?
I haven't. But
was there anything that either one of you presented to Miko where she was no, that's terrible, start over? Was there anything like that?
Is there something
There was one for me, and I was happy because she was so nice about everything that at some point I was do you actually like this, or you're just being nice?
Is any of your feedback real?
Yeah. There was one particular scene that we were having. I had to do 4 options for that, I think 4 or 5 options. We eventually nailed it, but there was one, and she was just very honest about it, and as she should. And whenever that happens, I always try to have a conversation with the filmmakers that is not necessarily musical, but more all right, I think I missed something, because whenever I write and I put music to something, there's a story and dramatic reason behind everything that I do. So if I put music there's a reason. It's going to play from somebody's perspective. It's going to push a certain narrative, oh, she's feeling lonely, or she's sad, or she's thinking of this person she's in love with. So I'm going to use the music that represents that person here, or this is dangerous.
I think that's an important thing to say, that you should have a reason for why all the stuff that you did is there.
Yeah, same with sound. You don't just put music or sound or an ambient drone just to be moody. You're moody for a reason.
So if you've missed it, or if it missed,
I might have I'm trying to understand. Maybe I missed the point. Maybe it's a matter of just the way I played it wasn't it. Sometimes it's simple. As simple as they don't like that instrument, or they or I went too far with something. Or sometimes what I meant to do didn't feel like that. It didn't feel scary. It felt boring, or whatever it is. So I try to kind of, again, analyzing the note and understand why did they say what they said? Did I miss something? and come to it from that place. And a lot of times what that makes the filmmakers do it makes them kind of think of adjectives and things that are not musical. Because if they do try to explain themselves musically, that might be tricky because they're not professionally trained in music.
May not be the same language.
Mhm.
They might say, they might think they say something musical, like it needs to have more bass. But what they really want is to have more grit to it, for example. And if I'm going to take that note literally, it'll just sound like it has more bass to it. Or they'll say it needs a crescendo, but it doesn't need to be louder, by volume. It just needs to feel like it's the music. Something about the music is rising or building, but it's not a dynamic thing, So I find that getting them to talk about it in just like they would with an actor or with a cinematographer, like, oh, this, she feels cold and lonely, or like, something like that. I know how to make that work with music. So that's kind of how I get out of that. And sometimes it's the director don't know what they want. They are figuring out themselves, and they're realizing that
They'll know when they see it.
Sometimes also like the scene is just not doing it, and you now have to create a feeling of loneliness when somebody is really happy, for example, and that might make your music not sound what usual lonely music sounds like because you're overcompensating something. And maybe you have to do that just for the director to realize that, it's just not well acted. So I'm gonna choose what's best here to kind of like accept the fact that it's not well acted, or put this ridiculous overcorrection over it. And it's this, what you want to do is keep the communication going and understand with them what, keep it going and have and come together to this realization, like, okay, we're exploring, and this feels like the best way to get out of this problem. It's kind of like troubleshooting almost when you hit those moments. What's worse is that what you don't want to do is take it personally and make it into a fight and try to, no, but this is good. This fits great.
Yeah.
You don't want to, this is the part where you put your ego aside and you're like, this is not about you. It's about the music. Separate the fact that you make this music. You're never going to be able to sell your music to the director, jam it down their throat. Like, you need to like this. This is good. That's not going to work. So that's what I do, is I just kind of take a step back, and it worked. It worked with Miko as well, and she was great. Other than that one spot, I think we were on the same page, so it made it easier.
Good.
Yeah. I don't think I had any,
Just nailed it every time.
I think so.
Yep.
That tended to be how I worked. That's how I do it. All right, Miko is now texting me because I was like, what did I write her? I wrote, what one thing did you hate about my work? That we had to change.
Tell you on the podcast right now?
Funny.
I said at the podcast. And then I get back, emojis.
There's so
And
many.
hold on. Yeah. this huge list comes back.
Yeah, give her.
That'd be awesome. After I was just like,
She's still
I hit it off the park every moment.
Like,
I was pretty happy with your work overall. You as a person, however. Overall, my work was good. Pretty happy.
All right, so it was fine.
So, on a scale of 1 to 10, I got a 7.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, favorite memory from the show?
I work the most with people on the stage, so just all the stage time is just super fun. Embrace those moments when you're on the stage with everybody, because it's when everything comes together, and that's when all the big decisions are made and everybody's either happy or not, but that's the moment. That's when it's all going to happen. Because aside from that, you're just sitting in a room alone working.
Making memories.
Yeah.
My favorite memory is probably, usually my favorite memory of every project is the end, when it's all approved and done, or when we record the orchestra. But because we didn't have an orchestra session. The other favorite moment that I remember was, in one of, I think it was the first meeting that I took. Prior to that meeting, or after, I don't remember, but I sent a bunch of music. After reading the script and responding to it, I sent music. I call it temp ideas, and I sent a folder with, here's some music, it might be wrong and it might be off. And I mentioned the fact in the meeting, I mentioned the fact that I sent this music out, and I was kind of defending it, because you don't want to send music and be like, I sent this music, and then they don't like it, and you're like, well, yeah, you send this music that we don't like. So I always said it with a caveat, and I explained this is just
You
from
probably
reading the
won't like
script. I
it.
didn't see anything, which is true. I don't know if it looks like what I'm reading. So it's probably mostly wrong, but hey, in case there were a couple of good tracks in there, let me know. And then I kind of gave my spiel, and Byron goes like, oh, actually, everything you sent was perfect. We already have it in the film. It's cut into film. We love it. It's working really well. I was like, everything I sent is exactly my vision. This is exactly what I had in mind. And of course it works.
But that helps me because that means it's in the guide.
Yeah.
You know, it's the guide music.
Yeah, it became, some of that music became the temp, and it wasn't that. So so that was a good moment because it makes you realize that like what you're thinking, what you're seeing is what your client is seeing, your partner
You're
is seeing.
vibing with the vision.
And the other thing is that it just kind of gets everybody on a good start. And it also meant like, I'm probably gonna win this project. I'm probably gonna get this project. So that was a good memory.
Oh, wait, was that before you were even hired for that?
That was before.
Oh.
They did this
your audition
of sorts, or I'm not sure how they went about it, but I know they met with a few composers, and I don't know if they all sent music. I did, but
so there you go.
That was a nice moment.
Send the music.
Yeah, there's a tip. It's a risky move.
It's a risky move, but
when it works, it works.
Yeah.
Send the music.
Okay, now we are to our typically our martini shot, but obviously we're having a red wine shot.
Okay.
So, last question of the podcast. What advice would you give to someone who is trying to do what you do?
Say yes to everything and do the best with every opportunity given. It's really that simple.
That is great advice. I don't know if I can top that. I would say, so for a film composer, I would say stay realistic with your goals and what you think you can achieve. What I mean by that is, don't try to do something that is like, you can be a dreamer, but you need to be a dreamer and allow the dreams to come true. Mm-hmm. But if you start dreaming in the wrong place or at the wrong time, your chances of those dreams come true are way smaller. So if you want to start in the business, you probably need to either work as an assistant, kind of pay your dues, and learn how to get there from someone, or be realistic enough to know about yourself that you're not the type that can work under someone like that, and you probably need to find a different way to learn. So that probably means that you need to create relationships with filmmakers and people like Miko, and work with them and build a relationship with young filmmakers, so that when they get a big break, they can take you with them. Either that, or develop that relationship with a mentor and somebody that can show you how to do it, and start developing those relationships. Because when you're doing solo film scoring work, then it's really all about relationships and which directors do you know and producers that can recommend you to future projects. If you don't have the relationships, you could be the next John Williams, but you're not going to get any work.
And there's probably that guy out there that would have been the next job, and they didn't get it because, there's just so much.
John Williams had every job.
There's so much sweat equity in this, and there's so much you have to just work hard, and you have to be talented, and you have to say yes to projects, and there's just so many.
And you have to be nice.
There's so much stuff. Yeah, you have to be a reasonable human being. That goes back to don't defend your work, beyond.
Saying yes to everything really helps though, because it's kind of it's a no-brainer. It's like, well, I need to say yes, so I say yes.
Yeah, there'll come a time in your career where you can say no, and you know why you're saying no.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you're just starting out, that is not the time. You should be saying, I don't care if it's you're editing dialogue on Cops. I don't care. It's you better just take that.
That'd be a tough job.
Sorry, Montana.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Thank you both. This was so interesting. Jeff Pitts, Haim Mazar. Thank you for being on Catch a Break.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been Catch a Break, Project Greenlight Edition. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. I'd like to thank our guests, Jeff Pitts and Haim Mazar, and all the guests for this season. And special thanks to Groovy.com, a dynamic platform that connects people to productions worldwide. Please check out our website at catchabreakpodcast.com and follow us on all the social media. Catch a Break is produced in partnership with Catchlight Studios and the Other 50%. Our theme music, Mantra for a Struggling Artist, was composed by Andrew Jocelyn. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive behind the scenes of Project Greenlight. Next season will be here before you know it, and in the meantime, I hope this helped you to catch a break.